As you know, all of the contribution to this seminar will feed into a policy paper relevant for all regions in Europe. Here to tell us more about that is Michaela Gensheimer from ESPON EGTC and Carlos Tapia from Nordregio. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone from us also. So all of you received the current draft of that policy paper. My colleague Mayan sent it around to everyone who registered for this event. And please consider this really as a draft, because that is what it is. We really want to use this event very much to gather further input, to also validate what is in the paper, or maybe, actually correct what is in the paper. And for that, we really need your active contribution in the subsequent sessions of today and also tomorrow. So what Carlos and I are going to do now is to give you a very brief introduction into that paper. The paper consists of altogether 4 chapters. Now there are only 3. The 4th one is going to be developed after this event. The first one actually looks at the reasons. It was actually also asked in this in the first slot this morning, why do we actually talk about green industrialization? Why is this happening now at such a fast pace, particularly here in northern Sweden? And this is obviously climate change. We will go into that in a moment. Then we're looking at green industrialization as part of the solution for global challenges, also just mentioned by Luisa. And then the main body of the paper at the moment, and I think that will remain like that, is looking at the various development challenges, but also opportunities that municipalities and regions are confronted with in relation to this process. And then the final chapter, that is the one that we still need to draft, and where input from this event here will be incredibly invaluable for us. That is going to be the conclusions and policy recommendation sections. So we are looking now into the first 2 chapters of that policy paper. So why are we actually talking about green industrialization? Why is that relevant? Well, as we all know, climate change is probably the most or the biggest challenge that humankind is being confronted with. And we have all seen already over the last few years that most regions throughout the world and also in Europe have experienced increased risks of being affected one way or the other by the impacts of climate change. So be it by increased temperatures during summer, increased droughts also, or increased floods. And what that means in practice is that ecosystems, human well-being, economic sectors will continue, certainly also in the next couple of years, to be adversely impacted by climate change. Regions then also, as a consequence, need to continuously improve their adaptive capacity to still be able to basically allow life there and to allow also economic activity. And what the European Union did on EU level was to develop the European Green Deal, as we all know, which kind of sets the framework for everything that is now happening in relation to economic development, and certainly also concerning green industrialization that forms, in a way, a part of that overall encompassing policy framework. And clean, green, blue energy are required to reduce, obviously, the greenhouse gas emissions, because these are, of course, the source behind increased temperatures worldwide. So we're looking at a clean energy challenge, because obviously that clean energy needs to be generated and then also transported to municipalities and regions. And what we've also experienced for a bit more than a year now is higher energy prices caused by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which also resulted in a general risk of, not risk, but general crisis of cost of living crisis throughout the EU. Now, some of our research and data update within ESPON showed that the energy transition is happening already, but certainly not at a pace that would be sufficient to meet actually European Green Deal's target or also Paris Agreement targets. And what we also see is that the territorial potential for renewable energy use and deployment does not really automatically correspond to the potential for generating such renewable energy in Europe. So just to give you an example, during the period of 2012 to 2018, the electricity generated by solar panels was mostly generated in countries like the UK, the Netherlands, Germany, and these are obviously not the countries where you would expect the highest solar panel potential. So reasons for that are very often then that there are policy measures that are lacking that could actually support the better deployment of such energy. So what we recommend also here, based on our own research, is that strong policies and market conditions need to be put in place to really support this process of clean energy generation and further enhancement. And green industrialization will obviously play a crucial role there, since these industries do require a lot of green energy, as we already heard in the morning. And from that, Carlos will take over.
Yes, thank you, Michaela. I will take over talking a bit about the definition part of the green industrialization. I'm presenting today on behalf of Nordregio work that was coordinated by my colleague Nora Sanchez-Gassen, that unfortunately couldn't attend the seminar. But I will also, I will try to cover the main points myself. So what is the green industrialization? Essentially, the green industrialization is a new strategy to develop a greener industry, which implies fundamentally decoupling manufacturing growth from impacts such as resource depletion and pollution. And it is framed under the United Nations Industry Organization as one of the pillars that would allow us to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's essentially two main transformations that will take place. The first one is the total overhaul on the way we produce, collect, and store and transmit energy. And the second one is hopefully reconsideration of the ways we use materials, trying to keep them in circular loops for longer time. So that relates to the circular economy concept that we were talking about before. So what that entails in practice is essentially two things from the industrial perspective. One is that new green industries will be created. We heard a lot about that. And there's examples like the Northvolt factory in Skellefteå that illustrate that. But also that the existing industries, existing sectors will need to be transformed, in particular those that are more difficult to decarbonize, like the process industry. And the hybrid, the fossil-free steel making process is a good example of that type of transformation. So what are the advantages of the green industrialization in general? There's two big groups of advantages. One group is, of course, economic. Hopefully, this process will lead to stronger competitiveness of the European and Swedish companies. And this point is very important because front runners and early adopters of these new production systems will essentially define the standards, technology standards, regulatory standards for the future. So that will create path dependencies. And this is not new in history, as Professors Bengtqvist and Lulea have previously told us. There's been different innovation waves over time in the last couple of centuries that have been replacing energy carriers one from another, and have been implementing new ways of production and social organizations. So this is just another one. And those that will adopt earlier these processes will set the standards for the future generations, that will increase competitiveness for sure. But they will also improve resilience for many businesses, because there will be lower reliance or less reliance on volatile sources, materials, in particular energy, fossil energy carriers. And we are now in the middle of one of those processes with a strong impacts on our cost of living. Due to that reason, that is also related to the fact that these new sources of energy are by definition deflationary, and that implies that costs will reduce over time, contrary to those that are based on finite resources such as fossil fuels that are more volatile and tend to increase as resources become less abundant. So that will reduce costs and will increase productivity for many sectors. But what are the social advantages? I didn't mention it. Hopefully it was already clear by this and previous presentations that the main reason why we are implementing or we are in this transition is because of climate. We are doing this not because of nice business decision or deterministic view on the future, or because businesses want to make profit in different ways, but mostly because there is a need to protect the climate and to preserve the capacity of this planet to keep us all alive in a way. So that is the main advantage if we are successfully applying this transformation, that we can deliver on those climate goals. We will, of course, create a lot of jobs will be created. There are estimates that by 2050 at the EU level might be created roughly 2 million jobs if we apply these just transition processes properly. In the north of Sweden, of course, we are talking about many of these jobs and opportunities as well. But that is, of course, also creating trade-offs with those that already live here. And in order to materialize these benefits, there's a lot of needs to invest in reskilling of people that are already working on other activities. That relates to the attractiveness and attractivity aspect. This is a great opportunity to attract people. It has not been mentioned before, but this region where we are now and Västerbotten region, also in the north of Sweden, have been losing population roughly for 2 decades already, at least most of the municipalities in the inner part of the regions. So this is a good opportunity to attract people in those regions. But of course, this is also related to the provision of services to those that live already there. So, and there's this vicious circle, attractiveness and service provision that has been creating many difficulties to boost rural regions in Europe in general. And this is a very good opportunity to break that vicious circle by which you cannot have public services if you don't have population, and you don't attract population if you don't have public services. And also, and not least important, to improve health and well-being. Eventually, what we are talking about today is about reducing pollution, reducing externalities from our economic systems. Much has been said about what is going on today in the north of Sweden, so that is something I should not try to do again. But let me just share a couple of figures that are, I think, important. In Sweden as a whole, during the last 10 years, the manufacturing sector, production sector has reduced already greenhouse gas emissions by roughly 27%. And this is on the production side, but also consumption-related emissions have been reduced by 7% roughly in the last 10 years. So a lot of things are already happening, and this process has already started. But more will happen in the future for sure. The reason why the north of Sweden is a hot spot, and this is not stressed enough, I think, that these processes are not placed blind. They take place in very specific locations for a reason. And the reason why north of Sweden is so attractive for this massive investment that are flocking to this region is because of access to cheaper energy in general, and to supply of raw materials. And we've heard about that before. But there's also a lot of challenges, trade-offs, conflicts, issues that need to be solved and addressed. Otherwise, these processes will not fail. And this is my final point. So essentially, what we are dealing with here is with an enabling condition for sustainable development on this planet. So it is necessary. It is necessary. It needs to happen. It involves system change, as any other process of system change is a complex and intricate process that needs to be sorted out. It brings opportunities, but also challenges and conflicts. And for that same reason, it requires planning and anticipation. And we have been through these processes many times in history. Some of these are the kind of deep transition processes that were described before by the two professors that spoke before us, but also in a very pragmatic and visual way. This is what the picture is showing. This was the Dagen Hu, the day when Sweden decided to ride on the right side of the road and not on the left side as they were doing before 1967. And that simple decision implied a massive change in many aspects. It required new training, new production systems. It required new behavior. It required many things, similar things to those that we are talking about today. Traffic accidents in the months following to this decision were reduced. So these kind of things can be implemented, can be applied, and should not necessarily be dramatic or traumatic. So that is essentially our point. And in the paper, we are trying to collect good examples on how these things, planning tools, can allow local and regional policy makers to steer these processes in the right direction. And we would be extremely happy if we could learn from you as well, pick up your brains on these new ideas to have conclusions that reflect all this diversity of issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michaela and Carlos.